Hey guys, today I'm here with Kristen Him, a former public school teacher who is now unschooling and teaching everybody about unschooling, which I'm super excited about, especially since you have a public school background. It's not just, I can talk to people all day long about the benefits and how cool it is and how we should be doing it and how it's more natural, but it goes in one ear and out the other since I don't have the background knowledge really or background experience of the public school system. Well, we could talk all day about the problems with the school system and how unschooling is more beneficial and how it follows the interests of the kid to keep learning, they keep them wanting learning. I feel like the school system does a lot of crushing that.
It does indeed. Yeah. So that's actually one of the things that led me to this path. I was a teacher and for a long time before I even had my own kids, and then my oldest daughter started school, and uh, it was clear actually pretty early on that it wasn't going to be a great fit for her, but I didn't consider pulling out for quite a while actually. Um, so she went to one school, and then like after 2 years there, we tried a different school. And also before having my own kids, I was always like, parents should keep their kids at one school. It's never good to move them all over the place. And then I always joke that I was like the best parent before I had kids. So, like I knew what the right things were to do because I was a teacher and I worked with kids, but it's just completely different when you have your own kids. So kudos to all the teachers out there who are trying their best, and even those ones that don't have kids for sure. But yeah, so we tried a second school, and then pandemic, made a lot of changes for a lot of people. And I think it was a lot of what opened up my eyes to say, like, I can't keep pushing her through this. And when I realized what it was doing to her, it really started to get me reflecting on what it was doing to me, and that it was sort of crushing my spirit as well. So it was best to just get us both out of there.
How old was she? Like what grades?
So she was in second grade when the pandemic started, and then she did virtual school for her third grade year. And then we left at the end of her third grade year.
To unschool?
Hmm. Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
exactly where we're at because my son is in third grade and we are heavily considering pulling him out as well. My daughter's in kindergarten and she thrives in a traditional school setting, but it was also very obvious in preschool that this is probably not for him.
Yeah. Yeah. My daughter did okay in preschool. And we were fortunate to not have to send her to like daycare before that. We had grandparents in town that could help take care of her before that. So but yeah, I think it became evident actually pretty early on. And when I sent her to, I had this like, I'm not going to make her do homework because I don't believe, even as a teacher, I didn't really believe in homework. And I was like, I'm not going to make her do homework. But then I very much wanted to be that compliant person, which school sets us up for being compliant, right? That's one of the big aims. So we did it, and I forced it, but there were so many tears on both of our parts, and such a power struggle, and it was exhausting and not how I wanted to spend my evenings with her. So
Mm. Yeah.
um yeah, and I have another child. So we've been out about 3 years now. So she's homeschooled sixth grader at this point. And my other daughter is 6 and has never been to school. So
Well, cool. I'm afraid that we're gonna have to split my kids up, which is one of the biggest reasons we haven't already pulled him from the system. Because again, my daughter thrives. She'll lie about being sick and hide it because she knows that it means that she doesn't get to go to school that day.
yeah.
Meanwhile, he cries almost every morning.
Well, it's not uncommon for parents to have kids in different settings. I mean, a big part of unschooling is knowing what your kids need and providing it for them. So some kids enjoy school, some kids do well in school, um and so yeah, some parents send some kids to school and keep other kids home. And if you're able to pull your older one and things go well, and then at some point down the line school isn't aligning for your daughter anymore either, it's that much easier to pull her at that time once you've already started doing it with one kid.
Yeah, I always wanted to homeschool from before I even had kids.
Mhm.
The school system is great for some kids, but it's not a one size fits all situation. And obviously, since we've already covered how it works for one and not the other, but it definitely did not work for me. I'm very neurodivergent, and I learned more once I got out of traditional school setting than I ever did while I was in there. It was basically a prison to just house me for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. I didn't learn anything in there. I didn't learn anything. Social skills. Because there'll be like a homeschooling, you gotta socialize them, and you gotta make sure they get that socialization that they miss in traditional school. Well, I mean, they don't really get a whole lot of socialization in traditional school. Uh Less so now, I feel like, than when we were in school. I feel like it was a little bit more when we were in school, but I was bullied and riddled with anxiety and basically just stuffed myself in the back corner. It's very like hidden as best I could. So I didn't get any socialization either. And nowadays because of COVID and everything, they keep them even more separated than they did. And my son doesn't seem to be able to connect with anybody his age, and he's more he's more drawn to the adults and the older kids, which, haha, homeschooling or unschooling would actually give him more access to.
Mhm.
And I also agree about the not liking homework thing. You only get 2, 3 hours tops with them in the evening, and they don't teach them skills like how to cook for themselves or feed themselves properly, which is also something that I struggled heavily with. And I always said that, and I've always made a point to try to teach my kids stuff like that so that they don't have to struggle as hard when they become adults as like I did with the traditional standard American diet and whatnot.
Yeah, so on the socialization piece, yeah, it's kind of a joke actually among homeschoolers that, almost it's like a first question that a lot of homeschool families
It's
get when they say
the
they
only issue everybody
homeschool.
has.
Yeah, exactly. So then everybody's like, well, what about socializing? But the truth is that I mean, it's like a common mantra among teachers. Sorry, call it a mantra, but like you're not here to socialize. Stop talking to the people around you, that kind of thing. It
Uh-huh.
is true that schools are attempting to create more like collaborative learning experiences where kids do talk with one another. But of course, they're being very directed about how and what to say and what to talk about because it's like you have to be working on this project when
Mm.
you're talking to one another. But they've really reduced like lunch times and recesses and stuff like that. So there's very little open play time for kids at school. Their days are so structured and so controlled over like everything they do. Um, so yeah, I try not to like bash schools a lot when I'm talking about unschooling, but it's also, I think, really important to point out the inadequacies that schools have. So,
Absolutely.
it's a balance to strike, of course. But yeah, socializing, I mean, homeschoolers, unschoolers, it's like we're out in the world living life with our kids. They can talk to the people at the grocery store, they can order their own food when we go out to eat. My kids do their own transactions when they want to buy stuff because they get allowance and then they can spend it how they want. So they do all of those things. And I think those are all really important skills. And it teaches them how to interact with like a variety of people for a variety of different reasons.
It does. You see a lot of homeschooled kids these days. One of the big takeaways that people are often surprised about is that public school kids, when they're stuck with the kids their age, they tend to come out of that only knowing how to interact with the kids their age. Whereas a lot of people are surprised they'll interact with a homeschooled kid and they're like, wow, this kid was not only just like he was carrying on a conversation with me, an adult, and it was wow, I was so impressed with how well spoken he was. But then he turned around and was playing with my 3 year old and my 7 year old. Like just they blend in with the village aspect so much better because they have that experience to do that.
Yes, absolutely. It's so amazing to see the way kids interact. We were at I was at a sporting event for there was a homeschool league, like sports league. So this was a track and field event, and we knew one of the kids that was participating, so we were there to support her. But they were competing against schooled kids in the area. And it was really funny because I looked over, it was track. So there's a big track and then there's a field in the middle of it, but all the spectators were out on the outside of the track. So all the kids were in the middle. And the homeschool kids had all sat down in a circle and were playing a game. And there were kids, like you said, like ages like 4 to 15 in that circle. And they were all playing a game together and just like having a blast. And then one homeschool kid pulls out a guitar and starts singing. And like it was just so much fun. And when I'm looking around, all the other kids were just kind of like hanging out in their same age groups and, just chatting, which is also fine. But one of the things that I think is really detrimental about the same age grouping that happens in schools is that it creates, and there's a lot of aspects of school that create this, but it creates this need for competition, right? Like we're always comparing our kids to each other, and it's like if you're the same age, you must be reaching the same milestones, which is, not healthy and not really accurate. Like, yeah, kids go through similar development at similar ages, but it's just not like that. And they all have different interests and all kinds of things. So getting kids to mix with different ages, I think, pulls the focus of competition out of the realm of things. And it just brings into this more like of a collaborative, let's get together and do stuff together. It doesn't matter if we're different ages or, that kind of thing. So
Yes, which is definitely building the community aspect that helps every single one of us in the long run. Again, we don't want to bash schools where I talk about that a lot too, because I talk a lot about school reform and these types of ideas and how we've basically had the same system of school since, past 100 years plus, and how it needs to be updated. And we are working to update it. I see tons of changes in how school is for my kids versus how it was for us, and it's tons better. But honestly, like, I don't know if we have the funding or the manpower to make all of the reform adjustments that we need to address each kid and their specific needs.
that's a good point. And it's really hard to determine about like funding. That's a really interesting topic for me too. Because I think about it all the time and I would love to see schools like completely revamped. I don't know that we can tweak them anymore. I mean, we can obviously, and we will because that's what our politicians do. But my vision is more of like a completely dismantling and rebuilding the system, which is very drastic and radical, but that's kind of where I am these days. So, but when it comes to funding, I think we spend far too much money on schools and it's not going to the right places. Like it's not, it's mostly going to upper admin, which is sad. It's going to people who barely interact with kids, if at all,
Mhm.
and if we were to adopt something that looked more like an unschooly way, where we had sort of these spaces where kids could have open play and exploration, and they were surrounded by all kinds of cool learning experiences that they have the option to participate in, or they are invited to participate in, but never required. I really think that we could do this on smaller budgets than what schools are using right now, to be honest. We put a lot of effort into making kids sit still and be quiet. And we put a lot of effort and money into training teachers to train kids, because that's essentially what it is. We're teaching teachers how to like manage behavior and that kind of thing. And I think if we all just stopped and like cared about kids and trusted kids and just loved on them, I mean, like obviously in a very appropriate way, but just like showed them that they're great people and that they have strengths and help them overcome their challenges. I really think that could happen on a smaller budget than what schools are operating on.
Absolutely, especially since we have the access to the internet. There's so many resources nowadays. And it wouldn't take a whole lot to, get this kid going on this one app that teaches them this thing that they're really into, and then get this other kid going on this one. Because I mean, they all have their own iPads and Apple devices in class most of the time these days anyway. So instead of just universally having them all do the same thing, which, and I'm not there, so I don't know. people want to bash teachers, and I feel so bad for the teachers because they come into this with more or less the same mindset that me and you have, wanting to make a difference, wanting to do right by the children for the children's sake, for our future's sake, for all of the right reasons. And their hands are so tied by standardized tests and the what's the word? The people over them, the management.
Administrative, yeah, administration.
Administration. Yep.
Mhm. Yeah, and that was me too, totally. I was like, oh, I'm gonna, I decided I wanted to be a teacher because I had a favorite teacher in middle school who got fired for what we thought was a very unjust reason. And, there were lots of people sort of arguing to keep him, and the school board would not listen. And it was like, but I also saw what a difference he made and how much ever, and I mean, I adored this teacher, and so did so many other people. And it was like, okay, he's making a difference. I think I want to make a difference like he does. And so that was kind of my inspiration and calling to teaching. And I was like, I'm going to be that change. I'm going to make things good for people. And I did it for 17 years. And and like I said, it was just, I suddenly realized like I wasn't even there anymore. I wasn't even there in my head of like, I need to make a difference. I was just trying to be a good person for the kids around me, which matters and makes a difference, of course, but I
You
could, um,
never want anything until I turn the recording on.
of course. Uh, yeah, but it's so hard. And I agree, it's hard. I believe that 95% of the teachers in the system at least are there and have great hearts and are wanting to do the best thing they can for their kids. I also think a lot of those teachers, because I was that teacher, are convinced that they have to have kids reading at grade level and they have to have kids doing all of their work at grade level. And since I've left, I've discovered that grade level standards are completely arbitrary and not really that important. There's no proven benefit later in life for a child who read earlier than another child. There's no proven benefit for a child who did algebra earlier than another child. It's not a race. And it's not a like we all have to meet these milestones. So kids are much better prepared for adult life when they can learn the things that they're ready to,
Hmm.
when they feel ready and when they are motivated. So when they're ready, they're motivated. So it was like with my oldest child, she learned to read in kinder and first grade because she had to, but I actually believe she would have been much better off if she had waited a couple more years before she started. She was incredibly resistant to reading, but she did it because she had to. So, and now she's like almost never picks up a book for pleasure. Once in a while, it's something either friends are reading or there's like a TV show that she loves that also has a book, then she'll want to read it, you know. Um, but my little one is like, she's just reading, she's not reading, but she's exploring reading and pre-reading skills kind of in her own way and on her own pace. And it's really fun to watch because she's just like joyful about it all the time. And if she gets a little bit upset when we're doing something, it's like, okay, we can stop now. We'll come back to this another time.
Yeah, it's important to, because mine are the same way. My son can read when he wants to, and I mean, like, I don't know. It was a lot of tears, a lot of fighting. It did, a lot of resistance, and you mentioned there's no benefit to them reading sooner rather than later as they age, but I could see where it could do damage, forcing them to sit here and do this thing that they don't want to do. And then everybody's crying, people are yelling, we're stressed out for 2 hours trying to get this one page of homework done. And because we did I, I don't I'm not going to do that on homework. I'm not going to do that on homework. But during the COVID 2020 shutdown stuff, he did his kindergarten online. And that was the worst experience of either of our uh, education process because we were both crying. We had to sit there and do it. There was no flexibility. We had to get this done because this is what they said has to be done. And that's why we've been looking at a Renaissance school for him that's kind of like an in-between, but I'm afraid that it's just locking us into something that's exactly like it was during our 2020 experience,
Mhm.
where other people on the other side of a screen who have no contact really with my child are insisting that he sit at a computer for X amount of uh, hours a day and do what they say that he needs to do rather than just homeschooling, which is unschooling is probably what I would do because it seems easier to me to, and less management to just be like, okay, here is a list of categories that we can explore today. Which one do you feel like you're interested in? And if they're interested in it, you don't really have to sit over them and make them do it or micromanage. They'll just take off and do it themselves. But forcing kids, that creates a trauma where they relate books to stress and panic and all sorts of things that you don't want them to relate books to.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I mean, there are definitely schools out there that are working on different models. And in my state, the charter school system here is actually really great. And I worked at one of the charter schools here. Um, they're set up to be very equitable, like they're all by lottery. So
Mhm.
people can't like buy their way into a charter school or something like that, which is really great. So they're open to everybody. There are some barriers, some charter schools don't have buses. So then parents who struggle with transportation have a harder time. Some schools require like parent volunteering, which can be hard on some families too. But for the most part, I feel like our state is working on charter schools. And I know at least one family that found like she has a few kids and her oldest really wanted to go to school and she found a school that she felt comfortable with because it wasn't too much of the traditional model. And there was a lot of project-based learning and kids were able to choose some topics and that kind of thing. So, there are schools out there that are working to provide different settings for kids because they recognize that, the traditional model just is not a good fit for a lot of people. Oh, and I wanted to touch on something else. When you were talking about your daughter, and this is not in any way about her, but I was a kid who actually fit the school model really well. I like played the school game
Mhm.
very well. Like I got the rules and I figured it out and I did it and I got, I won't say I was a straight A student because I wasn't, but I did very well with actually very little effort.
Mhm.
Like I managed to do a lot of my homework in school so that I didn't have to deal with it at home, but I still did all my work and like turned it all in and that kind of thing. Um, but I still recognize now as an adult that I have come away from school with like many school wounds. So that's a word we use in the unschool community a lot. So it's kind of a belief of mine that like anybody who goes through the conventional school model will likely walk away with some school wounds. Although it's also kind of like nobody grows up without some
Oh.
negative experiences, right? So I'm not trying to say like unschooling will make the world just full of roses and there won't be anything terrible that happens. We all have things we need to heal from as we grow up. So there's that. But yeah, so even though there's people who are doing well in school, who are thriving in school and that kind of thing, they'll likely have some things to heal from. Whether or not they seek healing in those realms is up to them, of course. But yeah.
Yeah, when I first went down all this rabbit hole was before I even had kids. And because again, the school system was not good for me. It was couldn't have been worse probably. And so I never wanted to send my kids to public school. I always wanted to homeschool. So I was looking at other options and I really, really liked the idea of a charter school, but we
Mhm.
don't have any around here. So uh our only choices in my area are homeschooling, unschooling, or um, private schools. And all the private schools are religious based, which is
Yeah.
fine if you're into that sort of thing.
Yeah, for sure. And private schools, even if they're not religious based, even if you find a private school that aligns with your values, again, they're not always accessible to all families. You know, they cost money, and sometimes they have scholarships, sometimes they have programs, that kind of thing. Another thing that's cropping up a lot around the world right now, especially around the US, are things called micro schools. So these are basically private schools, but they're really small. So they only host a small number of students, and usually just have like a few teachers. So those are another option that parents are looking into. And some are just starting them because they're like, we don't know what else to do. We're just going to start this school because there's nothing here for our kids. And, you know, a lot of people worry about homeschooling, especially people who live in more rural areas, that they need community. They're looking for community. And it's true. We can't kind of live, I mean, we can live in solitude, but I personally believe that, you know, you mentioned the word village earlier, that we all need our village. We all need our community to help us and support us, and for us to offer our own ways of supporting one another. I think it's really good for us all to be doing that both ways, receiving and giving of support.
Absolutely. And public school can do that to an extent, but it really, to an extent, just to an
Yeah.
extent. And we're all craving the connection and the village and the community that our ancestors developed in, like it's written into our very DNA to we're social creatures.
Mhm.
And I mean, so like public school gives you an opportunity to engage with your community and your village a little bit more, but it's not really even a village because you're not really creating bonds. You're just showing up for this event or that event and you see each other in passing. And yeah,
Yeah, it's almost like false community or something that happens at schools. And I'm not saying there isn't real community pockets within it. I'm sure there are, like, you know, smaller neighborhoods, people who have some really strong stuff going on. But it's really interesting too, even when you think about you know, like when a kid's having a birthday party, I see this question all the time, like, do I invite the whole class? Can I really afford to have a party for 25 kids and their siblings and parents, you know, or whatever, those kinds of things. So it's just interesting because then even if everyone's invited, it's like, oh, you know, I don't know, is this real community? Is this like really what it feels like? So that's tricky. But yeah.
I'm gonna make my husband listen to this episode because he's the reason that we ended up in public school. He loved school and thrived in the school setting. It worked for him, and he is hung up on the socialization aspect. Granted, he had a group of friends that he is in high school that he is still friends with 15 years later. And that is a beautiful thing. That is not the norm.
Yeah.
And that's something that he needs to realize. Especially if you see it's not working for yours, then it's hard though. It's so hard to find alternatives. We do have an in-between school that's very local, which is wonderful and great. It's kind of the only one of its kind. It's a hybrid, and you do like 3 hours online a day or something, and then you do like 3 hours twice a week on campus or something like that. But you're done before noon every single day.
Oh,
And
cool.
yeah, it's wonderful and it's very STEM oriented, very hands-on, very collaborative. They don't do a lot of sitting at a desk. They do a lot of projects and whatnot. But it's so hard to get into because it's kind of small and everybody wants into it because they see the benefits of it versus the traditional school. I feel like a lot of people have, so it's on a waiting list that's a mile long, but I feel like a lot of people recently have been leaving the public school system in droves. There's so many more homeschoolers than there was.
There definitely are. And that was another sort of effect of the pandemic shutdowns and everything that happened around that. Um, but yeah, there are more and more people leaving because the system, as much as they're like improving on it, it's still just incredibly broken. And I think more and more parents are realizing the school is not a good fit for my child for a number of reasons, from, you know, being forced to read too early, to being bullied by kids, to being bullied by teachers, you know, to all these, to kids' needs not being met. You know, there's more and more acceptance and recognition of neurodivergence. and the fact that with neurodivergence brings of different needs, and it's just really hard for one teacher to meet the needs of 25 kids all at the same time. Um, I really hope your husband listens to this episode. And I also, it's actually kind of common for like one parent to want one thing for the kids and another parent to want a different thing. My sister actually chose unschooling for her kids. She, like you, did not like school at all. She hated school. She had, teachers were like terrible to her, and she did have friends and that was great, but like, yeah, it just wasn't a good experience for her. And she did a lot of research when her kids were really, really young and chose unschooling when her kids were like 1 and 3. And I think she had a bit of convincing to do with her husband very similarly. He like loved school. I wouldn't say he had a group of friends that he's still friends with, but he really thrived in school. He loved to read. He loved to like, one little thing about him was that like his parents would be like, go outside and ride your bike. And because he was reading all the time in his room. So then he would ride his bike to the library and just read more at the library. But he just loves school. So it took some convincing, but he is like, her kids are 14 and 16 now, and he is 100% on board. Like, so it took some work, but it happened. And he eventually was able to like see all the benefits, and that it also fit their family lifestyle very well, because they're entrepreneurs who run their own business, and one of the tough things with schools is you can't even like take a vacation with your kids without getting in trouble with the school for the absences. So they love to take vacations when it's not everyone else's spring break, because that's where everywhere's busy and stuff like that.
Crowded.
Yeah. But I do love working with resistant family members. So if you ever want me to talk to your husband, I'm happy to.
I might have to take you up on that. Let me let this cat outside so she'll leave me alone.
Of course.
Okay. Yes on all of that. Yes on I would like to take vacations without having to beg the school for permission to take my child somewhere else. Because I mean that gives them culture, that shows them new places and new things to be and do and opportunities. Because uh you mentioned unschooling uh helps our kids figure out who they are instead of waiting until they're adults, which is what happens to most of us. We just wake up one day in our late 20s, our 30s, our 40s, our 50s, even. And it's like, oh crap, I have just been following the motions this entire time, and I have no idea who I am. And a lot of us don't even have, a lot of us don't really know who we are because we haven't been uh, introduced to options outside of our own immediate town. I always
Yeah.
joke about how everybody in my town either becomes a cosmetologist, a um, school teacher, or a nurse. And like, if you don't do one of those things, like, well, is there anything else? That's what.
Right. I hear you. I'm gonna hang on 1 second because I have a kiddo here. What's up, baby? A lot or a little? Did you get a rag to wipe it up? Awesome. Oh, it's on the carpet in the living room. Okay. I will clean it up when I come down. Okay. Thanks for letting me know. I appreciated you saying earlier that you could deal with interruptions, because before I came up, I was like, okay, honey, you can't interrupt me for the next hour. But of course that never works. So
Oh yeah, no, I get it. I have there are 6 people who live in my house, 3 of which are 10 and under. And then I have 2 cats and a dog, and we can video edit if we need
awesome.
to.
Cool. Thanks.
Absolutely.
So yeah, you were talking about vacations. I'm trying to remember what else you were saying because I was distracted.
Authenticity.
Authenticity. Oh yeah, and the like figuring out who you are. That part.
Mhm.
I just love that part so much
Me too.
because around unschooling, it's just so much about encouraging kids to be who they are. And, schools kind of squash that. They're
Yeah.
like, no, don't be like that. You can't, so it's really, and schools really want everyone to learn. I said this before, they want everyone to learn all the same things on the same timeline, in the same way. And it's just not how humans are. We have different interests, we have different passions, we have different strengths. And why study years and years of math if you're going to hire an accountant to do all your math stuff for you when you're an adult? And, I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, our math teachers were always like, you're not going to carry a calculator around in your pocket all the time. And now we all do.
Yeah.
So, and I'm picking on math a little bit. I actually love math, but
Oh,
but
I
it's
can't math. Can't math. My kids will be like, my kids love math. They play games with math and they
yeah.
want me to play games with math. And they're like, hey, mom, what's this minus this? And I'm like, hey, Google, what's this minus this? It's going to
Yeah.
answer. Don't answer me.
Yeah. So we kind of I think there's a funny little meme going around about like, just encourage your kids to be their weird selves and see what it turns into, and then there's another one I've seen where like, oh, you're homeschooling, won't your kids be weird? And we're like, yeah, that's the goal. Like weird is good, and we want everybody to be their own unique selves, because that's where creativity and innovation come from.
Mhm. Yeah, that's where
Not
you find your
in the box.
happiness.
Hmm.
So many people are not happy and they don't even know why.
Yeah.
And well, it's probably because, and this isn't like universal at all. Nothing's universal. Everything's relative. But the vast majority of us have been like we were taught to go through the motions. We disassociated in third grade and then never stopped.
Hmm.
And we're just being handed tasks and directions and following it and okay, well what next? Somebody tell me what to do. I don't know what to do. And we have to go to they teach us that we have to go to professionals to be able to know anything about ourselves, and we can't listen to our bodies and figure out what's wrong with us and how like figure out our lifestyles and how we need to tweak them a little bit. We need somebody else to tell us how to. It just squashes every bit of critical thinking and independence.
It does. And there's lots of teachers and schools and curriculum trying to teach critical thinking. And that's a huge one. Like it's a huge discussion point because critical thinking, it's just impossible to teach it. Well, I guess it's not impossible, but it's critical thinking comes from like being frustrated and having problems and then having to have the creativity to figure out how to solve that problem, not saying here's the formula for how you solve that problem. That doesn't teach critical thinking. And so Peter Gray, if you haven't found Peter Gray yet, he's amazing, and he has this great book called Free to Learn, and he puts out lots of articles and all kinds of things. And he's a big proponent of something called Sudbury schools, which are like democratic schools. They're basically unschool schools. Um, and so he recently put out an article, actually, I think it's an older one that he just reposted, but about how college even does not help critical thinking. Like most people finishing college have no better critical thinking skills than they did when they entered college. So yeah, it's really interesting. But when it comes to authenticity and, us knowing ourselves, and you talked about trust, I think, or you said something, but in schools we're taught not to trust like our bodies, right? We have to ask permission to go to the bathroom, and sometimes kids are told no. They're only allowed to eat at certain times. They can't be like, I'm hungry, I'm going to eat now. Nope, that's for later. That kind of thing. So we're really taught not to trust ourselves at all or our bodies at all through school. And that's a really detrimental thing. It's really important for people to learn how to listen to their bodies and figure out what their bodies are telling them. And I think that's why we're all walking through this world like needing so much medicalization around our bodies. And instead of just trying to get to the root, it's all being treated with like, chemicals,
Mm.
man-made things. So, but another big part of unschooling, there's families that try unschooling and say that didn't work for us. And I am a firm believer that unschooling can work for every single family. But it's really a lot of work on the parents' part. So parents think, I don't know, that it's just going to like turn into this beautiful, wonderful thing if they just like let their kids loose. And of course, it's not just letting your kids do whatever they want and hoping for the best, which somebody actually defined unschooling that way on a Facebook thread once. And I was like, no, no, that's not what it is.
My kid would play video games for 14 hours straight if I let him do that.
Well, yeah, I don't know. We don't do tech limits in our family. We don't do any
Well,
screen
I don't
limits.
either, but every single day, like you have to, I'm just playing off of what you said. Like you can't just let them do whatever. You do have to like parent a little bit more.
Yes, you absolutely need to parent. You need to get to know your kids a lot. So, but a big piece is the parents working on themselves. So there's this whole concept called deschooling, which goes along with unschooling and homeschooling. And people define it very differently, but we have like some people talk about deschooling as a period of time after you leave school, and it's kind of like the concept of detoxing school, if that right? So you just kind of, and it is helpful for people who go to school. It is very helpful when you pull out of school to have a period of time of like very low demand, right? It's not necessary to like jump into academics as soon as you leave school. And that can help people sort of find their rhythms and find like, what works best for their family, because it's also not probably great. Not all people want to get up and out of the house and learning at 7:30 in the morning. So it's good to find, the times of day that your family is more active or more reflective or needs to rest, and to honor rest, of course, because we don't do that enough in our society either. But the bigger piece of deschooling for me and for a lot of people I talk to is it's this like ongoing and probably never ending digging into our own conditioning and sort of peeling back those layers and figuring out, um, do I really need to be rushing around all the time? Like, yes, schedules are important, but they don't need to dominate our lives, and they certainly don't need to impose stress on our lives. So, when we're rushing out of the house to do something and I'm feeling this stress bubble up, I'm just like, okay, I'm going to take a couple of deep breaths. It's not the end of the world if we're late to where we're going. It's good to slow down. So deschooling is a big piece of unschooling, and I think parents who engage in that will find that they have a much more successful unschooling journey with their kids.
Absolutely. On another note with that is I find that unschooling, since it is interest driven, is oftentimes produces people, professionals in certain areas that are more well equipped than their counterparts who went to a traditional school and got a degree for it. And that's something that I struggle a lot with, is that I have all of this huge knowledge base, but no degree that says I have this huge knowledge base. And people, a lot of people, I can't think of any right off the top of my head, but a lot of people who are top of their field in this category or that category, like world renowned expert in XYZ, a lot of them don't have degrees. And the reason is that degrees put you into this box, this structure to where you feel like XYZ is the only way that you can get the answer to F problem. Whereas if you're unschooling and you're exploring this, for one, you're interested in it, obviously, and so you're more willing to spend more hours and more time studying it and researching it and analyzing it and looking into it. And like, for example, therapists, you'll find a lot of them, I feel like you have to address problems in a certain formula. Whereas, therapy in itself, the psychological aspect of humans is way more abstract than it doesn't make any sense. And so you have to have that um, abstract ability to think to be able to plug in your knowledge where it's needed rather than insisting they follow this formula that's not working for them. That's
Yeah.
schooling as well.
Yes, no, for sure. I think being able to follow your passions is going to make you a much bigger expert in that passion than just a degree or a piece of paper that says that. And just like I said, colleges, when I was in high school, I was really eager to get to college, partly because I knew I wanted to be a teacher, partly because even though I did well in high school, I already said, like, I kind of recognized it as a game and that, like, I just needed to play by the rules and I would succeed. Um, and I was kind of done with it. I wasn't interested in like the drama that happened amongst kids in high school. And so I was really eager to get to college. And I have, my older sister was like, you're gonna love college. And uh, it's so much fun because you can pick all the classes you want to take and you can study what interests you and blah, blah, blah. And
An
a lot
extent.
of that wasn't true. It
Yeah.
just like there's still all these prerequisites. Like you still have to do all these required classes. You have to take your required math and your required history and like
Mhm.
all these things. And then, of course, I was on this education path to be a teacher. So then there's all these requirements to get a degree in that field. Um, and so, yeah, I only got to take a couple of classes that I would even consider fun. And just, those were like the electives, and there's only room for a couple of those. So yeah, I don't. And then I actually started a master's degree when I was still teaching. I was like, oh, I'm going to become an administrator. That's the next step for me. This was like right before the pandemic. Uh, and there were a couple of books that I had to read for that degree or for that class, um, that actually had me turning away from public school. I don't think the professors intended that. Like you were supposed to be going towards administration, not running the other way from schools. But that's actually what happened. And yeah, so with unschooling people or anybody who's able to sort of follow their passion, I think they have a much better grasp on what that passion is. And there's this I think there's a number that people use where even if you don't have a degree, if you have this many hours of experience in this field, you're considered an expert. I think it's 15,000 hours. I'm not really sure if that's right, but or maybe that's how many hours people spend in school.
I think it's
Uh,
10,000 hours.
is
I
it
know.
10,000 hours that calls you an expert in something?
Mhm.
Okay, that's what I've heard then. I think there's a it's 15,000 hours is the estimated amount of time that people spend in school from kindergarten through 12th grade.
Mhm.
And so I think that's why that one popped in my head too, because there's a cool podcast actually about it's called I think it's called Deschool Yourself, and they talk about the 15,000 hours of like damage that we're all overcoming when we leave school. So
Honestly, though. So I
yeah.
guess to prove that you're an expert in these things, you just need to keep really good track of the books you read.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's hard to say. Like, I think
Mhm.
people establish authority in a variety of ways, right? You can write a book on something and then all of a sudden you're an authority on it, regardless of how many books you've read or how much experience you have. But I
It
think
doesn't even
it's
have to be an accurate book.
right. Exactly. I mean, my mom's a pretty incredible lady and she's retired. And in her retirement, she decided she wanted to become a yoga teacher. So she took a class, she took a course to become a certified yoga teacher, and that was really cool. And then a little while after that, she was like, oh, I want to do breath work. So she took another course, to work on breath work. But in a conversation with her one day, she was like, I don't really care if my teachers have a certificate in the thing that they're teaching me. Like if I'm finding value in the class, then I find value in the class, and it doesn't really matter what credentials they have behind their name. So I really appreciate that perspective.
Yeah, I teach yoga. I have a certification to teach yoga and meditation, and I've collected a whole host of certifications, like official pieces of paper that I have that says that I am accredited for these things. And I can promise you that I gained zero knowledge from all of those courses. They were all a complete joke that was just taking me through the motions and, you know, answer this multiple choice question.
Mhm.
And every bit of my knowledge came from self-study. I got the pieces of paper just to have the pieces of paper, I guess, to hand to people when they were like, are you, which nobody's ever asked me. Maybe a gym. I've had a couple of gyms that are like, we just need a copy of your certification and then you're good to go. But
But no students. Students have never been like, I want to see your diploma.
right, right,
Yeah.
no. And it's probably just for insurance purposes. But that's the only like hang up really that a lot of people have is that, well, to get a job in these fields, you have to have a diploma or some kind of like college degree. There's the word. To prove that you know how to do these things. And it's so frustrating that for a long time there, I was applying for job after job after job, and I didn't have a degree that said that I was like I was capable, but like I guarantee you I'm more capable than a lot of these people who do have a degree in
Mhm.
XYZ. And that's not me trying to like be like I don't have like an inflated ego. It's just um I hyperfixate. And when I promise you that I've spent the last 12 years studying this, you don't understand that I eat, breathe, sleep, dream it. Like
Yeah.
I'm listening to audiobooks 24/7. I guess my podcast is a really good I could try to I should try. I mean, I don't have to now, but back in the day I could have like given this as credits. Like, look, here's 72 hours of me talking about this subject right here.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I think honestly, one of the best ways we learn things, people talk about different learning styles. So I learn by reading, I learn by talking, I learn by, moving. But honestly, the best way for people to learn things is to do them.
Hmm.
And so, when you were talking about your yoga certifications, I was thinking, well, you probably learned a lot by teaching yoga to other people,
Oh yeah.
right? And you learned like, oh, this series went really well today, or this series didn't go well, or, maybe I want to give my students more feedback or, different things. So I think just by doing things, nobody reads a bunch of books about cooking and then walks into the kitchen and cooks, a beautiful meal the first time, right? Like you get better at cooking by cooking every
Mhm.
day. You get better at exercising by exercising every day. It might be helpful to have a trainer or somebody who knows what they're talking about, but sometimes those people disagree, right? You can have like three different fitness trainers and they'll all have different opinions on the best way to build stamina or to build muscle or whatever. I don't know because that's not my thing, but but yeah, I think people learn best by doing things. And so I started a business when I left school. I started a business here in Albuquerque where we have um, homeschool classes, and we are definitely unschool inspired. And I call this business like sort of my own little unschool project. I say that very informally, but like through building this business, I had to learn how to build a website, and I had never built a website before, and I figured it out. And I had to learn how to take payments from people, and I figured that out. And I had to learn how to write policies for my business. I had to learn how to have all these different things that being a teacher never taught me. And I could have taken some business classes, but I think it was a much faster and less expensive path to just go for it. I mean, like you said before, we have the internet, and the internet has its ups and downs and its goods and bads, but you can learn how to build a business, or learn how to build a website and do all kinds of other things. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's the different. I was talking about this yesterday, actually. It's the difference between book work versus field work. You can
Mhm.
read all the books in the world on this subject right here, and you're gonna learn. There's so much that books can't teach you because there's so much that books you can't translate into words the understanding of. Just like meditation, for example, I can tell you till I'm blue in the face all the benefits of meditation and how to do it step by step. But until you actually start practicing it and practicing it and practicing it, it's things are going to start clicking in your head that are understanding beyond books could ever bring you.
Yeah,
It's field work,
absolutely. Yeah.
completely different. And you can just jump straight to the field work via YouTube tutorials these days.
You absolutely can. I mean, my older daughter wanted to learn to crochet a couple years ago, and I tried to like watch some videos myself and then teach her, and she was not having it, and I was really frustrated, and it was so we just dropped it. And then like a year later, she and then like you need some paper. Like a year later, she just picked up her crochet hooks and some yarn and did some tutorials herself, and now she crochets all the time, and I still don't know how, so it's okay. But she's made herself sweaters and hats and like made gifts for friends. She's a couple people have commissioned her to make things for them, so yeah, it's been really cool.
Yeah, there's a whole world of things out there that we can learn and help our kids to learn that they can take. And if she'd been stuck in school 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, she probably wouldn't have even known what crocheting was quick enough to be able to know that she wanted to do it. And
Yeah.
then if she really likes it, she could take her all sorts of places for the rest of her life. She
Yeah,
could end up with a six-figure business crocheting.
she could. She absolutely could. And another thing that's really cool about unschoolers is even though they can follow their passions, and they do follow their passions, they actually end up being fairly well-rounded kids. Like they don't generally just follow one focus. They will follow one focus for a long period of time, but then they'll move on to something else, and then they'll do another thing. And and I talked about my niece and nephew earlier, who are like my always unschooled, and we're like super close. We see each other all the time, so I know them pretty well. And they have like a lot of different interests and passions, and they're brilliant in all of them. My nephew is like a bug enthusiast. He knows like all these different insects and spiders, and he loves them. He's also really into stop motion video and is good at that. And has an interest in becoming a voiceover actor, and all these different things that he loves to do, and he can explore them, however he wants, and in as much quantity and quality. And some of them can turn into a livelihood, and
Mhm.
some of them can remain just like a passion and something they like to do, even if it doesn't bring them money.
Yeah, and we're taught these days because that is so normal, right? And we're taught that if you jump around from this interest to that interest, well, you must be ADHD. And I try to explain to people all the time, like right now on a big trend on like TikTok and stuff is ADHD cleaning. And oh, you're ADHD if you clean like this. I don't know. I think that's just how cleaning works. When you like you go to you take dishes from one area and you take them to the sink and like, well, I was cleaning that one area, but now I got to do the dishes, and oh, now I have to do this to be able to do the dishes. That's just how things work. You follow a passion and interests until it plays out and you get whatever it is that you needed from that. And now you have that to take and add to another interest or passion that, this first passion sparked your drive into this new one because it's kind of plays off of it's not the exact same thing, so it looks different, but it's actually very similar. And now you have the experience from that one passion to add on to this new passion, and everything just builds and it becomes beautiful and again well-rounded.
Yes, I love that. You called it it is beautiful. It's so beautiful to see all the different pieces that make up a person, because nobody's made of one interest or one passion. I mean, there's people who will say like, this is my hyper focus, or this is the thing I love, and I guarantee that person has other things that are important to them too.
Yeah, they want us to pick one trail and stay on it because that's where success is. And like, sure, but we also need to teach our kids that it's okay to quit something when it's played out for you.
Yes.
You don't
Yeah,
have to
we've talked
commit
about,
forever.
yeah, this comes up amongst unschooling families a lot, because it's like we want to support our kids, and there's parents who worry when their kids want to quit something, and it's like, well, maybe, but they really like it, maybe I should push them to keep doing it. And yeah, there might be times when that happens, but I think more likely let them quit, and if they want to return to it in a month or a year or whatever they can, but maybe they've gotten what they need to get out of that thing right now. And so then just let it lie and let it simmer, because sometimes they take what they got out of it, and it percolates and it turns into other things. And sometimes it's just that's what they needed and it's done, and it's okay. But yeah, we it's just another societal thing where we're like, you have to push through, you have to do it, you have to go all the way, you have to complete it. It's like, says who?
Which to an extent I agree with, but like for example, if you join a softball team and then halfway through the season you're like, well, sorry, baby, we got to finish out this season. And once we finish out this season, sure, we don't have to sign up for another season.
Yeah.
But if it's, my son and I, we have this app that we downloaded to learn guitar.
Mhm.
It's a super cool app. It really shows you how to do it. And we'll do it pretty consistently for a few months, and then we'll not touch it for 8 months. And then we'll pick it up again for a few more months, and then we'll not touch it for 8 months. And like, there's nothing wrong with that.
Mhm.
You only have X
No.
amount of hours in a day. It's okay
Yeah.
to chill on stuff for a little while if you need to.
Yep. Exactly.
So thank you so much for being here today. This is really
Yeah.
fun. You want to tell people how they can find you? And of course, I'll make sure everything's linked nearby.
Sure. Yeah. So I have a website for me. It's called kristenhim.com. But I do put stuff on there. I also have like I said, I run a business here in town, and you can find out more about that at abqhomeschoolconnection.com. And then I have a Facebook page called Unschooling America, and I'm working on getting that one a little bit more active too, but that's where I just like to talk about unschooling.
Cool. So you do like a virtual one-on-one stuff too? So like, do people have to be local?
No, that's a great question. No, I do offer like unschool support coaching type stuff too, and that can definitely be virtual. I have a free unschool support group that meets once a month in person and once a month online. So people can reach out to me about that if they want to get onto that. And then I also offer paid coaching one-on-one stuff.
Cool. You
Mhm.
can she can help us convince our co-parenting partners.
Yes. Yes. I would love to help you convince your co-parenting partners. I've done it a few times now, and it's so rewarding to help a family like see, you
Yeah,
know. uh,
because most of their hangups have nothing to do with the child in question. It's their own trauma or belief system or whatever programming.
Yeah, yeah, societal expectations that we all strive to live up to for some reason.
For some reason,
Yeah.
expect validation.
Yep.
All right. Well,
Wonderful.
thank you so much. You have a great day.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was lots of fun.